Ever wondered what it's like to work alone in an abandoned hospital? Discover the chilling true story of a night watchman who stumbled upon a former patient living among the shadows. What secrets did he uncover, and how did he escape? Watch till the end to find out. When I was 26, I landed a job as a night watchman at an old, defunct hospital on the outskirts of town. It was a gig I needed to pay the bills, even if it meant patrolling the Eerie corridors from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. The hospital had been closed for over a decade, and my task was simple. Keep an eye out for vandals and trespassers. The place was massive, with its labyrinthine hallways, abandoned operating rooms, and endless wards that echoed with the memories of patients long gone. It was creepy, no doubt, but I had grown used to the unsettling atmosphere over my first few weeks. One Wednesday night, I began my shift as usual. I checked in with the control room, grabbed my flashlight and radio, and started my rounds. The hospital's silence was overwhelming, broken only by the occasional creak of old pipes or the rustle of papers from rooms I hadn't yet inspected. Around midnight, I reached the 3rd floor, which housed the old psychiatric ward. The doors here were heavy and reinforced, and the windows were barred. As I turned a corner, I noticed a faint glow coming from one of the rooms at the far end of the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. There was no electricity in the building, and I was the only one with a flashlight. I approached cautiously, the light growing brighter with each step. The door to the room was slightly ajar, and I could hear a faint humming sound from within. Pushing the door open, I shone my flashlight inside. The room was empty, except for an old hospital bed and some scattered medical equipment. But the light wasn't coming from my flashlight. It was a small, battery-operated lantern placed on the floor next to the bed. Next to the lantern was a stack of old patient files. Curious, I picked one up and flipped through it. The pages detailed the treatment of a patient named Robert H., admitted in the early 2000s. The notes were extensive, describing severe paranoia and delusions. As I read on, I noticed something chilling. Recent entries, dated within the last few weeks, in a hurried, scrawled handwriting that matched the doctor's notes, but was far more erratic. Just then, I heard a soft, shuffling sound from the hallway. I quickly turned off my flashlight and hid behind the bed. Peering through a gap, I saw a figure move past the door. It was a man, dressed in a hospital gown, with disheveled hair and a wild look in his eyes. He was muttering to himself, clutching a bundle of papers to his chest. I waited, my heart pounding, as he entered the room. He went straight to the lantern and began rifling through the patient files, adding more papers to the bundle he carried. He seemed agitated, his muttering growing louder. After a few minutes, he left, and I heard his footsteps receding down the hallway. I cautiously emerged from my hiding spot, my mind racing. I knew I had to report this, but something compelled me to follow him instead. I wanted to know who he was and why he was here. Keeping my distance, I trailed him through the hospital. He moved with familiarity, clearly knowing his way around. He led me to the basement, where the hospital's old storage rooms were located. As we descended, the air grew colder, and the smell of damp and decay intensified. I followed him into a room filled with rusting hospital beds and broken equipment. In the far corner, I noticed a makeshift bed and a collection of personal items: clothes, food wrappers, and more patient files. The man sat on the bed, spreading out the papers around him. He seemed to be studying them intently, his muttering now a steady stream of words I couldn't quite make out. I took a step closer, trying to hear, when a loose floorboard creaked under my weight. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, we stared at each other, frozen. Then he lunged towards me with a wild scream. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways as I made my way back to the control room. I called the police, barely able to catch my breath as I explained the situation. They arrived quickly, and after a thorough search, they found the man still in the basement, clutching his papers. It turned out he was a former patient, living in the hospital for months, obsessed with the old files, and convinced he was still under treatment. I quit the job the next day. The memory of that night etched into my mind. The thought of someone living in those dark, abandoned halls, believing they were still a patient, haunts me to this day.